Taehyeong, Director Han to everyone else, calls for Sehui's attention. There's something different in his voice that she can't quite figure out. "You're really stressed today, aren't you?" she asks, scanning his face like she's looking for a hidden message. He exhales sharply, running a hand through his dark hair. "Yeah, I am." No hesitation, no attempt to hide it. He's not one to complain, so for him to admit it outright, that means something. She hums in acknowledgement. They sit in silence for a bit, and it's weird how something so quiet can feel so right. Then, as if pulled by some invisible force, they lean in. Their kiss is quick but says everything it needs to. In that moment, the weight on her shoulders lifts, her mind clearing like a sky after the rain. When they pull away, though, there's this sadness in her eyes that won't go away. Subtle, but it's there. Maybe he sees it, maybe he doesn't. Whatever the case, they let the night sweep them away into their own little bubble where nothing else exists. Morning comes way too soon, and Sehui's phone won't shut up. The buzzing drills into her head until she finally drags herself awake. She squints at the screen, a bunch of missed calls all from the same person. "Mom." "Great." Sehui groans, totally confused. Her mom's supposed to be in Vietnam for work, but somehow she's still playing detective with Sehui's life. Does that woman ever sleep? Is there a hidden camera somewhere? Honestly, at this point, Sehui wouldn't even be shocked. As she sits up, she spots a note on the table. Of course, Taehyeong snuck out without making a sound. The guy moves like a ninja in the morning. Meanwhile, she's over here stumbling around like a zombie who hasn't had coffee in years. Till the weight of the calls presses down on her. Constant monitoring, the pressure, it's suffocating. Her mother doesn't even need to be physically present to make her feel like there's an invisible leash around her neck. Her mind drifts back to a conversation with her yoni. The details are hazy, like a dream slipping through her fingers, but one thing stands out, those chilling words. "You'll be set free once you've served your purpose." The memory sends a shiver down her spine. What does that even mean? The more she thinks about it, the heavier it sits in her chest. Some people get reassuring pep talks from their elders. Sehui? She gets cryptic, borderline villainous statements. Reality can be cruel. Sehui steps outside and the cold air hits her like a reality check. She shivers instantly, regretting every life choice that led her to underestimate the weather. The note in her hand crinkles slightly as she tightens her grip, her gaze dropping to the familiar handwriting. Taehyeong. She thinks about him for a moment. His sharp mind, his unreadable expressions, the way he somehow manages to be both infuriating and admirable. He's definitely a special one. So special, in fact, that she's jealous. Everything seems to work in his favor, while she feels like she's constantly walking a tightrope. Meanwhile, back at the office, gossip spreads like wildfire. Today's hot topic? Directoran. Some say he's the vice chairman's illegitimate son, whispering like they've just uncovered the plot twist of a drama. But despite all the talk, Taehyeong remains unshaken, walking through the building with the confidence of someone who's heard it all before. Perfection is the standard he sets, and people can't help but be impressed. The men acknowledge his work ethic with nods of approval, while the ladies, well, let's just say a few dreamy sighs escape whenever his name is mentioned. It's almost unfair how effortlessly he commands attention. Sehui throws a glance toward the office workers deep in discussion, catching snippets of their conversation. She doesn't need to hear everything to know what they're saying. Taehyung's progress in the company is undeniable. He's a spectacle to behold, the kind of person people either admire or envy. She exhales, shaking her head slightly. What a frustratingly impressive man. Taehyung's rise in a wealthy household is nothing short of impressive. He's held his place not through luck or connections but through sheer conviction, grit, and relentless hard work. Nothing was ever handed to him. He carved out his own space and made sure no one could take it away. Whenever Sehui crosses paths with him, that fact weighs on her like a heavy coat she never asked to wear. Standing next to him, she feels small, like a candle flickering beside a spotlight. She knows it's not his fault, but that doesn't make the feeling any easier to ignore. Compared to him, she's weak, and she hates that she knows it. Her phone buzzes again, cutting through her thoughts. This time, she actually answers. The moment her mother's voice comes through the speaker, reality comes crashing back like a wave she forgot she was standing in. The truth is suffocating. She isn't her own person. She exists under her mother's watchful eye, a puppet whose strings are pulled at every turn. It's exhausting, but what choice does she have? Things weren't always like this. At least, not to this extent. 1 month ago, everything changed. 1 month ago, she crossed paths with Director Han. And since then, nothing in her world has been the same. Taehyeong stands on the tennis court, catching his breath after a long match. His friend, already leaning against the net like he's been exhausted for hours, shakes his head. "Take a break before you collapse, will you?" Taehyeong smirks but obliges. As they cool down, the conversation drifts as it always does to something completely unrelated. Women. You know, his friend starts, eyeing him knowingly. You spend all this time on the court, but have you ever thought about investing that energy into, I don't know, an actual person? A girl, maybe? Our male lead doesn't even look up. No time for that. His friend sighs, clearly unimpressed. Right, because you're Director Han. The man, the myth, the workaholic. Glad we're on the same page. Everyone says the same thing about him. Super professional, career-driven, practically married to his job. It's not exactly a false statement, but Taehyung doesn't feel like defending himself. Instead, he changes the subject. What about Director Kong? Haven't seen him in a while. That, his friend perks up, eager to spill. Oh, Kong? He's here pretty often too. But when he's not playing, he's off with someone special. Our guy raises a brow. He's dating? Yeah, but he's ridiculously private about it. Only a handful of people know. Interesting stuff. The two men walk along the court, the conversation flowing easily between them. One talks, the other listens, but in the back of our male lead's mind, a thought lingers. How different things are for people who make room for something beyond work. Taehyung slows his pace, a thought nagging at him. After a brief silence, he finally asks, "Be honest. Am I being spied on?" His friend raises a brow. Spied on? What, like reports being sent to Director Kong? Our guy nods. His friend chuckles. Relax. You're not that interesting. Satisfied, though only slightly, Taehyung lets the matter drop as they continue walking through the gym. The sound of weights clanking and treadmills whirring fills the space, but another noise cuts through the usual gym ambience. A voice, high-pitched, desperate, and in clear distress. Please, just 5 seconds, just let me breathe. Taehyung glances over. A personal trainer stands beside a bench, arms crossed as he watches his client struggle. And that client? Sehui, our female lead. She looks seconds away from passing out, practically begging for mercy. Her legs tremble, her face twisted in agony, but her trainer? Unmoved. Instead, he shuts his eyes briefly, then exhales like he's searching for patience. Go harder, he instructs, as if she isn't already on the verge of collapse. Sehui lets out something between a groan and a whimper, clearly regretting every decision that led her here. But then, her trainer says something that catches Taehyung's attention. You just started. If you leave without finishing, I can't answer to your mother. He looks nervous. No, scratch that. He looks terrified, as if even thinking about disappointing Sehui's mother is a crime punishable by law. Our male lead watches, intrigued. A mother so fearsome that even a personal trainer is afraid of her? Now that's something. The coach stops, arms crossed, and gives Sehui a long, hard look, one filled with suspicion. Did you go out drinking again? Our girl, still struggling to catch her breath, blinks at him. Her silence is answer enough. The trainer groans, running a frustrated hand down his face. Unbelievable. This is why you're struggling. Do you know how much effort I put into making sure you stick to a strict diet? How hard I work to keep you on track? And yet, here you are, making my life 10 times harder. He's spiraling now, pacing like a man who's already preparing his last words before facing Sehui's mother. Because let's be honest, if she finds out about this, his career, and possibly his entire existence, might be over. Meanwhile, our female lead, despite being in visible pain, keeps apologizing between breaths. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Just, please let me sit down. Taehyung hasn't looked away once. Something about the whole situation keeps him glued to the spot. She looks genuinely ready to burst into tears, yet she's still forcing herself to push through. Doesn't make sense. Why? Why push yourself this hard? That's the only question looping in his mind as he watches her, unable to look away. Taehyung's phone rings, snapping him out of his thoughts. He takes the call. It's Juno. Are the materials ready? He asks, keeping his voice steady. All set, the voice on the phone replies. I'll meet you at the entrance of the HJ Hotel's Sports Center. Got it. As the call ends, Taehyung's gaze instinctively drifts back to Sehui. She's still struggling, still pleading with her trainer, and yet still pushing through whatever impossible standard she's been given. He watches, expression unreadable. His friend's words from the tennis court earlier come back to him. Maybe they had a point. Maybe it really has been too long since he's met someone. Too long since he's had any kind of romantic involvement. Maybe that's why he keeps looking at this girl today. The thought lingers, clouding his mind as he stands there, unmoving. Will he take action? They haven't even officially met. Where will their story lead? HJ Fashion, Sehui finishes her business English class, leaving the room buzzing with appreciation. Her students clearly enjoy the session, and one of them, a guy with an easy smile, approaches her afterward. With a cup of coffee in hand, he offers it to her, along with another round of compliments. She accepts both with a grateful smile. Noticing the slight strain in her voice, he tilts his head, curiosity piqued. Been busy lately? He asks, sipping his own drink. She nods, explaining how last week was packed with classes, leaving her voice a little worse for wear. He nods knowingly. Sounds like you fought in a verbal battle and barely made it out alive. She chuckles, shaking her head. He then asks if she works exclusively with HJ Fashion. Sehui confirms that, for now, she does. For now, he repeats, raising an eyebrow. So, you're keeping your options open? She smirks. Just saying I go where the opportunities take me. He lets out a low whistle. Smart move. He's genuinely impressed. It's not every day you meet someone who not only studied in the US but also mastered English well enough to teach it and even work as an interpreter. That's a lot of talent packed into one person, he muses. I'd be lucky if I could just order coffee in English without confusing the barista. Sehui laughs. Well, step 1, don't panic. Step 2, don't say espresso. As the conversation flows, the admiration in his voice is clear. Sehui, as usual, remains humble. She's just doing what she does best, but moments like these remind her how far she's come. The guy leans back, still trying to process something. You're 28? He gives her a once-over, eyes narrowing like he's trying to spot a wrinkle or some hidden clue. No way. I refuse to believe it. You've got the face of someone who still gets ID'd buying cough syrup. Sehui laughs, shaking her head, but he's not done. Seriously, this is next-level sorcery. You've got people out here aging like avocados, and then there's you. He recovers quickly, flashing a grin. We should grab a drink again sometime. So I can continue being mind-blown by the spectacle that is you. There's a playful confidence in his voice, but there's no denying he means it. He mentions how the HR team is basically her fan club now and how much fun they had at the last company dinner. He's sure they'd all love to have her around again. Sehui doesn't turn him down. She takes a slow sip of her coffee before nodding. Just let me know when, she says smoothly. If he was excited before, now he's on another level. The guy practically radiates enthusiasm, nodding like he's just been given VIP access to something exclusive. She watches him, amused, before taking another sip. I won't miss it for the world. Her words are warm, inviting, but her eyes? They tell another story. Even in the middle of a light-hearted conversation, the weight of her mother's expectations lingers like a shadow she can't shake. No matter where she goes, no matter how much she accomplishes, she's never really free. Her face, her success, her very life, it all feels like something she doesn't fully own. And that's a reality she's learned to live with, whether she likes it or not. Mom was, for lack of a better term, a control freak. The kind of person who probably arranged the fruit in the fridge by color and size. Sehui walks on, balancing her files, books, and coffee like a seasoned pro, but her mind is somewhere else, somewhere tangled in the past. The shots she had to take as a kid to keep her from growing too tall or developing curves. All part of her mother's grand design. Perfection, as dictated by someone who decided what perfect even meant. People turn to stare as she passes, their eyes lingering on the striking figure she's become. Flawless, poised, exactly as intended. But none of them know the blueprint behind it. No one stops to wonder what it took to craft this version of her. Would they still be impressed if they knew? Her phone buzzes. Then again. And again. With a sigh, she shifts her coffee cup, freeing a hand to check the messages. It's from her team leader in HJ Fashion's design team too, asking her to check her email for an urgent update. No time to dwell on the past. Back to business. She pulls up the email, scans it quickly. K Magazine. A moment later, the message is gone, deleted without hesitation. An offer, no doubt. A chance to branch out, expand her reach. But Sehui doesn't bite. Whether it's her own lack of interest or her mother's influence whispering in the background, she doesn't stop to figure it out. All she knows is that, for now, she's staying exactly where she is. Looking out at the terrace, Sehui quickly realizes her plan for a peaceful coffee break is not happening. Every seat is taken. Not even a tiny corner is left for her to squeeze into. So much for that idea. With a small sigh, she decides to head home instead. Meanwhile, in another part of the firm, the director is deep in conversation with a few colleagues. One of the guys, probably feeling brave today, suggests he should take a break once in a while, before he runs himself into the ground. Director Han just scoffs. Rest? Him? Not likely. He smirks, teasing them. You'd love that, wouldn't you? Me slacking off? The guys laugh, shaking their heads. Classic director Han. Always on the move, always pushing forward. From a distance, Sehui spots the scene. Her eyes linger on the director, curiosity sparking. Could this be the same man Mr. Jong had gone on and on about at the last staff dinner? He sure had a lot to say that night. Sehui had listened, but now, seeing the man in person, she wonders if the stories match the reality. Mr. Jong had gone on quite the speech about the director at the last staff dinner. Apparently, ever since the guy was just a regular employee, his performance evaluations had been off the charts, so much so that the company had never seen anything like it. And if that wasn't enough, in just 3 years he shot up the ranks from assistant manager to manager, and now, here he was, a director. Fast, efficient, practically unstoppable. If he were just another average guy, someone might have tried to trip him up along the way, slow down his meteoric rise. But no, he wasn't just good, he was perfect. Untouchable. Kind of employee that makes everyone else question their life choices. Naturally, the staff respected him. How could they not? Even Mr. Jong, a man not easily impressed, had nothing but high praise for him. And if a fellow guy was singing his praises like this, you know it had to mean something. Sehui studies the director from a distance, curiosity flickering in her eyes. A man like that, so polished, so respected, could he be someone who manipulates others as effortlessly as her mother does? The thought lingers, especially with the rumors floating around about his alleged ties to Vice Chairman Kong. Office gossip claims he's the man's illegitimate son, but with no solid proof, it remains just that, a rumor. Yet as she watches him now, he looks normal, relaxed, a cheerful smile on his face as he chats with his colleagues, completely at ease. If he were a manipulator like her mother, he'd be the worst kind, the type that hides behind warmth and perfection, fooling everyone around him. That kind of deception would be crueler than anything she's seen. It would be disappointing, really, if he turned out to be someone like that. These thoughts pass through her mind in mere seconds as she walks by, but they leave an impression. Whether he's as good as he seems or just another master of deception, only time will tell. Somehow, against all odds, the director catches a glimpse of her as she walks by. There's something familiar about her, a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. Could it be the young lady from the gym the other day? It's a wild guess, but somehow he just knows. His sense of perception must be on another level. Without hesitation, he says a quick goodbye to his colleagues and heads off in her direction. Coincidence? Fate? Who's to say? Meanwhile, Sehui makes her way down the stairs, hands completely full, files, books, coffee, the whole struggle package. And with each step, her nerves creep up on her. Maybe she should have just stayed back for a few minutes and finished her coffee. A little break wouldn't have hurt. But no, she had to be in a rush, and now here she is, lost in her own thoughts. And then it happens. One misstep, a slip, the world tilts, and for a split second, panic floods her mind. Is this really how it ends? A dramatic workplace accident? An embarrassing trip down the stairs with papers flying everywhere? Nope, not today. Before she can even process what's happening, a hand grabs her, pulling her back just in time. Trong, Teddy. And just like that, disaster is avoided. She blinks, heart racing, and looks up. Of course, the director. Their paths finally cross, and in the most unexpected way possible. He's just saved her from a very painful, very humiliating downfall, literally. Sehui turns to see the face of her rescuer, and boom, her mind short-circuits. It's the director Han. Of all people. Shock floods her system, and before she can think, she blurts out an apology, still trying to process what just happened. Her heart is racing, but her feet? Well, they're currently trampling her work ID. Director Han notices immediately. You might want to move your foot, he points out, eyes flicking down. She follows his gaze, mortified, and quickly lifts her foot. He picks up the ID, dusting it off before holding it out to her. Simple gesture, right? Except she's still holding onto her books and coffee like her life depends on them. No free hands. Without thinking, she asks, "Could you clip it back on for me?" He moves to do it, but then, he hesitates. Mid-action. The moment stretches just a little too long, just enough for the situation to feel different. Sehui feels warmth rush to her cheeks. Blushing? Oh, come on. But somehow she still manages a quiet thank you. Director Han, however, is completely in his own world. His eyes briefly scan her features, sharp, elegant. His gaze drifts lower, tracing the curve of her neckline. Fair, smooth. Just looking at her feels dangerous. Then, his eyes drop to the ID in his hand, taking in her name before finally letting go. It all happens in mere seconds, but something about it lingers. Kind of moment that sticks, refusing to be forgotten. And the craziest part? Just from a single glance, her name, her face, the way she carries herself, he's already imagining something beyond these office walls. A connection that goes further than a workplace accident. Odd, right? But some things don't need logic. Sehui thanks him for the help, and Director Han brushes it off like it's nothing before turning to leave. But in reality, something just shifted. Nothing huge, nothing dramatic, just baby steps. Kind that sneak up on you before you even realize you've started walking. As he steps away, he glances at his wristwatch, checking the time. But it's not really the time that's on his mind. It's her. What just happened? Why did he pause like that? That's not like him. He's never the type to hesitate, yet for some reason, something about her threw him off. He couldn't place it, but one thing was certain. Sehui Yun was now on his radar. He looks down at his palm, the same hand that had just reached for her, clipped her ID, kept her steady. A smirk creeps up his face. This feeling, it's unfamiliar, unexpected, but he's intrigued. And when Director Han is intrigued, well, that's definitely something. What's he going to do about it? That's the real question. Meanwhile, back in class, Sehui finds herself staring into the void, completely zoned out. Then, bam, the director's face flashes in her mind. So random. She blinks, shakes her head. That was weird. Then, bam, it happens again. His face, his expression, clear as day. What in the world? Before she can even process it, a voice snaps her back to reality. She jolts slightly, eyes darting around. Turns out, the people in the room had been calling her attention. The guy seated in front of her grins, amused. Spacing out, huh? Then, as if that moment never happened, he casually informs her that the general manager is treating everyone to drinks at the T Hotel Sky Bar tonight. Hard liquor. Good company. He wants to know if she'll be there. Sehui blinks again. A staff dinner? The idea catches her off guard, and for some reason she feels oddly dazed by it. Why, though? It's just a company get-together, right? The guy at the office doesn't let up. He really wants Sehui to be there. She tries to reason with him, pointing out the obvious. She's not even an official employee. Shouldn't that be enough of an excuse? Apparently not. Her refusal falls on deaf ears because everyone starts chiming in, practically pleading with her to come. Come on, Sehui, you're basically one of us already. They throw in some dramatic sighs, exaggerated looks of disappointment, the whole guilt trip package. She lets out a weak smile, but inside she's battling with the decision. Drinking? Not exactly her best idea. Alcohol means weight gain, dull skin, and if her trainer, or worse, her mom, ever finds out, trouble. Big, unavoidable, not worth it trouble. But in the end, she doesn't turn them down. Go on ahead, she tells them. I'll meet you there. It's a promise. The moment those words leave her lips, the room erupts with excitement. No one even tries to hide how pleased they are. The cheers, the high fives, it's as if she just agreed to sign $1 million contract. Looks like Sehui Yun is officially part of the team, whether she planned on it or not. Dinner time arrives in the blink of an eye. The venue? A massive, upscale restaurant with a vibe that screams sophistication. Exquisite interior design, soft, glowing lights, the kind of place that makes you feel like you've stepped into a movie. Everyone settles into their seats, looking comfortable, ready for what's sure to be a memorable night. The men pour a glass of premium alcohol for Director Han, the mood light and celebratory. One of them turns to him and raises a toast, speaking highly of Sehui. She's been doing fantastic work, he says, genuinely impressed. I can see now why YJ's vice president personally recommended her. And her class? It's the most popular among all the in-house language courses. You've got some real talent here. I might not be there, but even I can't help but feel a little impressed by Sehui. She's earned that glass of premium alcohol, no doubt. Sehui, modest as ever, smiles and thanks her boss for the kind words. I promise I'll keep giving my best moving forward, she says with sincerity, setting the tone for what looks like an evening of promising conversation and potential opportunities. She's definitely got the support and the spotlight on her tonight. Whispers flow quietly across the table, the ladies chatting excitedly about Director Han. Their voices are hushed, but the anticipation is clear. Sehui glances over at them, taking a slow sip of her drink. One of the women laughs, admitting she dressed up extra nice just in case the director decides to show up tonight. The other lady joins in, the two of them chuckling like they're in on some secret. His name is a hot topic. Sehui's noticed this in her short time with the staff. Talk about Director Han is practically constant. It's like he was born to be noticed, to be recognized. As she drinks, Sehui can't help but think more about it. What kind of man is he? There's something about him, something she can't quite put her finger on. He seems like the type who's never had to bow down to anyone, ever. Unlike Seonjung Construction, where power dynamics are always at play, HJ Group is one of the top 10 companies in the business world. Director Han isn't just a big deal, he's a name. Kind of name that commands attention without even trying. As it stands, Sehui can't help but feel a twinge of jealousy toward Director Han. It's a bitter feeling, but it's there. She believes he'll never know what it feels like to be in her shoes, to wake up every day feeling like she's less than a bug, constantly stepping on invisible cracks in the floor just to keep herself from being crushed. That's how she feels every single day. It's a sad, humbling realization. Before everything went to hell, before her world crumbled around her, Sehui had lost her sister, Jihui. The funeral was a blur, a sea of people singing praises about how much Chairman Yun had loved both her daughters. Even though Jihui was gone, Sehui was left to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders, especially when it came to her mother. They begged her not to worry her mother, to keep up appearances. But in the end, her mother wasn't fazed. Business was always the priority. There she was, at the funeral, discussing the future of the organization with a mystery man. The man reassured her that Chairman Yun would soon be out of the picture and that Seonjung Construction would finally fall into their hands. It's a cold, calculated conversation in the middle of such a personal loss. But for Sehui, it's just another reminder of the world she's trapped in. Her mother orders Sehui to step on the scale, and despite her trembling hands and heart racing, Sehui obeys. Her mother informs her coldly, as she always does, that she must stay fit, follow her every command, because that's the only way to make them happy. Later, we see Sehui, desperate, banging on the door, pleading for her release, begging her mother to let her out of this prison. "I'll never tip off a reporter again," she promises, tears streaming down her face. She's still so young, so desperate. She knocks on the door, her hands bruised from the force. She calls out for her mother, but the response is nothing but dead silence. In that silence, a crushing realization hits. No one is coming. She's been locked away for so long, the outside world is beyond her reach. Help is an illusion, a far-off dream. She cries, her sobs echoing through the empty halls as she succumbs to depression. Her fate has been sealed. There's no escaping this. Sehui is bound to be sold off, at the height of her youth and beauty, to a man whose face, name, and age she doesn't even know. It's the peak of her mother's cruelty, the depth of her manipulation. This is the world Sehui has been trapped in for so long. Mr. Jong pulls Sehui out of her deep thoughts, his concerned gaze landing on her as he notices her unsteady state. "You don't look so great," he says gently, his brow furrowed. "Are you all right? I'm guessing you've had a bit too much to drink already." Sehui offers a small, forced smile, trying to hide the discomfort in her own body. "I'm fine, just need a moment. I'll step out to the ladies' room to powder my nose," she says, her voice a little shaky but still trying to maintain composure. Mr. Jong doesn't seem entirely convinced and offers to walk her there, seeing how unsteady she is on her feet. "It's no trouble at all," he insists. "You seem a little drunk." Sehui shakes her head with a soft chuckle, reassuring him. "I'll be fine, really. I appreciate you offering, though." She gives him a quick, appreciative smile before turning to walk away. As she steps forward, she can't help but think about how sweet Mr. Jong has been, always looking out for her. It's a rare kindness, especially in an environment like this where people tend to keep their distance. But there's a catch. She can't let herself entertain such thoughts, can't even consider someone like him. Not with her mother's suffocating grip on her life, pulling the strings of every decision, every move Sehui makes. It's tragic, really. The idea of having someone by her side, someone who cares for her, seems like a distant fantasy, one that her reality can't afford. To break free from this relentless control, Sehui would need someone far more powerful than her parents. She'd need a force strong enough to crush the world her mother has built around her. Her steps start to feel heavier as she staggers down the hall, the weight of her thoughts mixing with the effects of the alcohol. With each step, her vision blurs and her head spins. The dizziness intensifies, and she realizes just how much she's had to drink. She tries to steady herself, but the world around her is spinning, and it takes all her effort just to stay on her feet. She can't deny it now, she's drunk. A little too much, actually. But as she stumbles on, she wonders if this feeling is just the drink or if it's something else. Something deeper, something she can't shake off no matter how hard she tries. Back to the idea of a companion, Sehui can't help but think about how much she'd need someone who could stand up to her parents, someone strong enough to handle their control, someone who could push back when her mother's influence takes over, someone like Director Han, the man, the myth, the legend himself. Sehui briefly lets herself imagine what it would be like to have him by her side. Could he be that person? Fate is crazy sometimes, isn't it? Just as she's lost in thought, dreaming of a future she could never have, she bumps right into him. It happens so suddenly, and she freezes in front of him like a deer caught in headlights. She can feel her heart race, and her body struggles to stay upright. She's still a bit wobbly from the alcohol, her head spinning more with every step. The liquor seems to take full advantage of her weakness, blurring her vision even further. It's like the world around her is spinning, and yet there he is, Director Han, closing the distance between them. His presence seems to grow larger and larger, his face coming into focus in the midst of her blurry surroundings. It's almost like he's moving toward her in slow motion, and despite the haze, his handsome face is all she can focus on. How odd, right? Before she even knows what's happening, her feet give way and she stumbles. In an instant, she's falling, her body unable to regain balance. But instead of hitting the ground, she falls directly into his arms. The moment is almost surreal. Her world has gone from spinning to being completely still. They're both caught in the embrace, and for a moment, neither of them moves. Sehui's alarmed, her mind racing as she processes what just happened, but strangely enough, she doesn't freak out this time. Her heart is pounding, but there's something different about this fall. Maybe it's the alcohol dulling her reaction, or maybe it's just the way he's holding her, but for some reason, she feels oddly calm. The moment lingers, and despite everything in her mind telling her to pull away, she just stays there, caught in the embrace, trying to make sense of it all. Director Han has a grin plastered on his face as he points out that this is the second time he's held her in an embrace now. His words hit her spine, sending an unexpected warmth rushing to her cheeks. Sehui blushes hard, and before she knows it, she yanks her hands off him, trying to put some distance between them. He doesn't miss a beat, teasing her with a smirk as he says, "Looks like you've got weak ankles, or maybe you just have a habit of falling into random men's arms." She doesn't have a response. She stands there, slightly flustered, unsure how to handle his teasing. Director Han doesn't back off though. He steps a little closer, his tone casual but with an undertone of something more. He asks if she has some time to spare. Time? For what? She's taken aback by the sudden question. She didn't expect this, especially not from him. She manages to reply, explaining that she's with a group at the dinner, so it won't be easy for her to just disappear. But he's not discouraged. He looks at her, his eyes steady, and asks if she could spare just a couple of minutes. He's got something he really wants to talk to her about. Sehui hesitates for a moment, still processing the sudden shift in the conversation, but she doesn't object. She nods, and before she knows it, he's leading her somewhere else, away from the dinner, away from the crowd, and into a moment that feels like it could change everything. Will he make a move? Will this be the beginning of something feisty? As Sehui and Director Han step into the elevator, all she can think about is where exactly this young, handsome man intends to take her and what could he possibly want to discuss. Her mind races with questions. The elevator ride seems to stretch on forever, but they eventually arrive at a different floor. The door opens to reveal a quiet room, and Sehui's alarm bells immediately start ringing. She wasn't expecting this. Director Han steps in front of her, his confident stride never faltering as he moves toward the center of the room. Sehui, still on edge, tries to ask what exactly he's doing and why he brought her here, but before she can get the words out, he cuts her off, telling her that there are too many eyes out there. He gestures toward a seat beside him, offering her to sit next to him. The air in the room feels thick, and Sehui's heart races as she wonders what exactly this is all about. He then asks with a cunning grin if she knows who he is. Sehui hesitates for a moment, then answers, saying she knows him as the director, Taehyeong Han. That grin of his widens, almost mischievous, as he leans in slightly, asking how much she really knows about him. But before she can respond, his phone rings, breaking the moment. He picks up the call, and Sehui watches as he casually answers it. The voice on the other end requests his presence back at the dinner, and he agrees, telling them he'll be down soon. But there's a catch. He asks them to hold things off for just 10 more minutes. 10 minutes. All alone with him. What is this really about? What kind of discussion is he planning? The air in the room feels charged, as if something is about to shift. Sehui's mind races. What's going to happen in those 10 minutes? He hangs up the phone and turns his full attention back to her, his eyes fixed on her as he asks one more time how well she knows him. Sehui clenches her fists, her pulse quickening as she replies, "I don't know you too well." The tension between them thickens, and Sehui can't shake the feeling that something's about to happen. She can feel it in her bones, this sense of anticipation hanging in the air. What's next? Only time will tell. Director Han narrows his eyes, a sly smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He leans back slightly, arms folding as he studies the woman sitting across from him. Sehui, a name that now lingers in his mind like a song stuck on repeat. He says he's seen her before, last week at the gym, then again just a few days later on the roof of HJ Fashion. And now, here she is in the very same hotel as him. Coincidence? He doesn't think so. In fact, he's so sure it's not that he feels the need to say something about it. His voice is smooth but laced with suspicion as he points out the pattern. First the gym, then HJ Fashion, and now here? Either you have a secret teleportation ability or you're following me. Sehui, however, remains unshaken. She's phased, she hides it well. With a calm expression and not so much as a blink out of place, she denies it all. Just a misunderstanding, she insists. Case of one man taking a deep dive into an ocean of conclusions with no life jacket in sight. Director Han studies her closely, his gaze sweeping over her like he's searching for fine print in a contract. She's stunning, too stunning if that's even a thing. And that's a problem, for him at least. Because every time he sees her, his mind doesn't just wander, it sprints full speed off a cliff. He swears it's playing tricks on him because the effect she has on him is completely out of the ordinary. It's different, stronger, almost ridiculous. He stays silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he exhales sharply through his nose, straightening his posture. His arms stay crossed, his gaze sharp. He doesn't like being thrown into confusion, but Sehui? She might just be the only exception. Or doesn't need to be a mind reader to know what's going on. The look in his eyes says plenty. Loud and clear. If his gaze had a voice, it would be making an announcement over a loudspeaker right now. He wants her. She can see it. She can feel it. And she doesn't need him to spell it out for her. Without hesitation, she speaks up, cutting straight to the point. She knows exactly what he's after. No need for sugarcoating, no need for games. She says it outright. He's trying to get her in his bed. And just like that, Director Han's lips curve into a smile. It's the kind of smile that makes people second-guess everything they thought they knew. Because on the surface, it looks innocent, almost too innocent. Like he should be holding a bouquet of flowers instead of delivering this kind of conversation. But Sehui isn't fooled. Not even for a second. The few words they've exchanged are more than enough to confirm what she already suspects. This man is anything but innocent. It doesn't help that he's absurdly good-looking. Unreasonably so. As if someone took their time designing his face with the sole purpose of making life unfair for everyone else. His smile alone is enough to throw people off balance, and unfortunately for our girl, she's not immune to it either. Still, our male lead stays cool and composed, confidence radiating off him like it's his full-time job. He leans back slightly, his voice smooth as ever as he tells her he already knows. He knows she's interested. He says it like it's a fact, like he just read it off a verified document. Then, with the same effortless ease, he glances at his watch, a subtle reminder that he's a busy man. He's got a schedule to meet in the next hour. But his room? Well, that's open. If of course she'd like that. Sehui is quick to go on the defensive, ready to shut this whole thing down before it gains any more traction. She's about to reject him outright, no hesitation, no room for misinterpretation, but just as the words start leaving her lips, her phone rings. Timing couldn't be worse. Or better, depending on who's asking. It's Mr. Jong, her associate. He must be worried sick by now. Not that she blames him. Considering the turn this conversation has taken, she probably should have checked in sooner. She doesn't waste any time turning on her heels, preparing to leave. But just before stepping away, she pauses, looking back at the ever-composed Director Han. Her gaze sharpens. He doesn't even know her name. He has no idea who she is. Yet here he is, making a proposal so bold, so shameless, it's almost impressive. Almost. Director Han doesn't seem the least bit bothered by her words. Instead, he tilts his head slightly, curiosity flashing in his eyes as he asks for her name. Sehui tells him, and for reasons beyond her understanding, a faint blush creeps onto her cheeks the moment she does. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Our guy, on the other hand, takes this all in stride. He rises to his feet, towering over her with that same air of confidence, that same knowing smirk playing on his lips. He says he's always been a man of adventure, and stepping into unknown territory? That only makes the game more thrilling, more fun to conquer. A quick glance at his watch tells him 10 minutes have already passed. That's enough for now. Before turning to leave, he casually informs her that a spare key will be waiting in the lobby, just in case she decides to stop by later. No pressure, just an open invitation. Sehui doesn't hesitate to shut that down. Loud and clear, she assures him she won't be coming back. If he has any hopes otherwise, he should go ahead and crush them now because disappointment is waiting for him on the other side. Director Han doesn't argue. He doesn't even respond. He simply leaves first, walking out with the same effortless composure he had when he arrived. Now alone in the room, Sehui stands frozen for a moment, left to replay everything she's just heard, everything she's just felt. It's infuriating, confusing, and worse, no matter how hard she tries, she can't seem to shake it off. Back at the dinner party, the tables are overflowing with extravagant fruit displays and drinks so expensive they look like they should come with security guards. This is no ordinary gathering. This is the elite table where conversations are smooth, handshakes are firm, and wallets are definitely too thick to fold. Director Han arrives, greeted by the men who waste no time questioning his delay. One of them raises a glass, teasing that punctuality must have taken a back seat tonight. Director Han, ever composed, responds with ease. He had to handle an urgent call. Technically true, just not in the way they might assume. A man at the table nods approvingly, commending him for his unwavering dedication. Says he's always buried in work, so much so that it's a wonder he remembers what fun even looks like. Director Han acknowledges the compliment with a polite smile, offering his gratitude for the warm welcome. Another gentleman sighs dramatically, lamenting that the night would have been far more entertaining if a few lovely ladies had joined them. But alas, such is life. He then shifts the mood, motioning for Director Han to step aside. Seems he has something private to discuss. Director Han glances at his watch, noting the time. With an easygoing tone, he informs them that he won't be around much longer. He's leaving the country in the morning. No long goodbyes, no drawn-out farewells. Just a quick finishing of his drink, a smooth nod of acknowledgement, and a graceful exit, leaving the rest of them to enjoy the night without him. Our male lead steps into his hotel room, the quiet hum of the city just a faint murmur beyond the windows. He stands still for a moment, scanning the empty space, and then, there it is, that knowing smile tugging at his lips. Exactly as expected, Sehui didn't show up. And not that he's disappointed, far from it. If anything, this only makes things more interesting. To him, this isn't rejection, it's an invitation, a challenge, a game with unpredictable rules, and if there's one thing he enjoys, it's a game worth playing. Morning arrives, bringing with it the buzz of a new workday. Director Han is already in his office, a sleek pad in his hands, eyes locked on the screen. The picture of Sehui stares back at him, surrounded by neatly compiled data. His secretary, ever efficient, feeds him more information as he scrolls. He listens intently, taking in every detail. Our girl's story isn't a simple one. Her family background is layered, messy even. The first daughter, Sehui Yun, had met an untimely end due to an unexpected accident. A tragedy, no doubt, but the circumstances surrounding it had left ripples in the family dynamics. Then there was finance director Jung Se-jo, a woman who, despite being infertile, had maintained her position with grace. Producing another heir was never an option for her. But Sehui? She was different. The outlier. The illegitimate child of her father, a fact that could have caused irreversible damage, yet somehow the family had chosen an alternative route. Jung Se-jo, rather than igniting scandal or seeking retribution, had opted to raise both daughters as her own, a decision that had shaped Sehui's life in ways Director Han could only begin to piece together. As the information settles in his mind, Director Han leans back slightly, fingers tapping against the screen. The more he learns, the clearer it becomes. Sehui is no ordinary woman. And that only makes him more intrigued. The secretary delivers the information with the enthusiasm of a man reading the plot of a best-selling novel, voice steady, tone unhurried. Every detail rolls off his tongue smoothly, but Director Han isn't just listening, he's absorbing. Eyes locked on the screen, posture sharp, mind running through every piece of information as if it were a high-stakes business proposal. Sehui Yun, English lecturer at HJ Fashion, recently returned from the US, a fiancé likely already handpicked by her mother. Nothing too surprising so far, but as our guy sifts through the details, there's something that doesn't sit right with him. The report states that both Sehui and her late sister Jihui were deeply loved by their adoptive mother Jung Se-jo. He can't wrap his head around it. He doesn't buy it. And honestly, neither would anyone with common sense. His eyes flick back to the screen, scanning through more data. That's when something else catches his attention. A note: the fortune of Seonjung Construction is set to be transferred to his granddaughter, Sehui, upon his passing, as per his will. Now that's interesting. That's got to count for something, right? Director Han isn't one to jump to conclusions, but the puzzle pieces in front of him aren't exactly forming a picture-perfect family portrait. Without looking up, he gives his secretary a simple directive: keep digging. He wants more details, more clarity, more insight. No gups, no lapses. He expects follow-ups without fail. In short, Sehui Yun is now officially a subject of interest. and Director Han has no intention of letting this curiosity go unanswered. Call comes in for the secretary, and the moment he picks up, his expression shifts ever so slightly. Subtle, just a flicker of hesitation before he clears his throat and turns to Director Han. With the usual efficiency, he delivers the update. Director Kong is on his way and his arrival is imminent. Director Han's brows lift ever so slightly. That's unexpected. He sets his tablet down, fingers tapping lightly on the desk as he asks the obvious question, why? What does Director K want with him? The secretary doesn't dance around it. It's about the dismissal of HJ Hotel's Chief Cha. And just like that, before Director Han can even process that information fully, the office door flies open with the kind of force usually reserved for dramatic courtroom objections. The room doesn't just get a visitor, it gets an invasion. Director Kong storms in, his face a fascinating mix of fury and disbelief, and he's not interested in pleasantries. No greetings, no small talk, just raw, unfiltered rage. His voice booms through the room, practically shaking the windows as he shouts one name, loud and clear, Taehyeong. His strides are quick, purposeful, each step fueled by indignation. He closes the distance between them in record time, stopping only when he reaches Director Han's desk. And then, bam, both hands slam down onto the polished wood, the impact echoing like a judge's gavel. The desk doesn't flinch, but the tension in the room skyrockets. Director Kang's eyes blaze as he demands an answer. Why didn't you listen to me? There's no real room for interpretation. This isn't just about business. This is personal. Directoran, completely at ease. In fact, there's a faint glint of amusement in his eyes, as if this entire outburst is more entertaining than concerning. Then, without missing a beat, he actually laughs. Director Kong, he says, his voice smooth, his posture unshaken. You should be thanking me. The sheer audacity of that statement momentarily stuns the older director. He blinks, his rage pausing just long enough for confusion to creep in. Our male lead leans back slightly, gesturing with an easy tilt of his head. We both know Mr. Cha wasn't the right fit for the job. And just like that, the storm returns. Director Kang's face darkens and his hands clench into fists. Gratitude? That's the last thing on his mind. You don't get it, do you? He growls, shaking his head. It's not what you did, it's who did it. His voice rises again, fueled by frustration. That was my call to make. I should have been the one to fire him, not you. He exhales sharply, as if trying to expel the sheer disappointment from his system. Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting for that moment? Our guy tilts his head, feigning deep thought. Ha! So this was a personal project of yours? Director K lets out a sharp scoff. Of course it was. That man was a thorn in my side for years. And you, he points an accusatory finger, just snatched that satisfaction right out of my hands. He shakes his head, exasperated. It's a power play, isn't it? That's what this is. Director Han doesn't answer immediately. Instead, a slow, knowing grin spreads across his face. He doesn't confirm or deny. It's much more fun to let Director Kong draw his own conclusions. Finally, after a moment, he leans forward just slightly and offers something unexpected. My apologies. Director Kong freezes, blinks, stares. Of all the things he expected to hear, that wasn't one of them. Now thoroughly skeptical, he narrows his eyes. You? Apologizing? He lets out a dry laugh. Right. And I suppose next you'll tell me you actually mean it? Our guy doesn't say anything, but the smirk lingering on his lips says plenty. Director Kong exhales sharply, frustration still bubbling beneath the surface. Look, he grumbles, I never expected you to treat me like an older brother or anything ridiculous like that. We're both directors, I get that. Cool's in the business world. But still, his jaw tightens and he shakes his head once more. You did me dirty. Director Han simply leans back in his chair, watching as Director K wrestles with his emotions. He doesn't confirm. He doesn't deny. He just watches. And for Director Kong, that's somehow even more infuriating. Director K has a solid reputation within the company, respected by the men, adored by the female employees. He's got charm, authority, and just enough polish to make him a favorite in the office. But right now, none of that matters. Right now, he's a man consumed by righteous fury, and he refuses to let it go unnoticed. Mid-rant, he pauses just long enough to check if Director Han is actually paying attention. A quick glance confirms his worst fear. Taehyung looks way too relaxed, as if this is all just background noise in his day. That only fuels the fire. Director K doubles down, making sure every ounce of his frustration is impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Director Han's mind? Somewhere else entirely. Not that he isn't aware of the theatrics playing out in front of him, But his thoughts have taken an unexpected detour. Recently, he came across news articles that describe director Kang as, of all things, cute. That word lingers in his mind now, but try as he might, he just can't see it. Cute? This guy? The one currently throwing a boardroom-level tantrum? No chance. The idea alone is so bizarre that it almost distracts him from the scene unfolding before him. Almost. But then, something shifts. The word cute doesn't just sit there, it attaches itself to an image, a face. And for the first time in a long while, director Han associates the word with someone in particular. Not Kang. Sehui Yun. The realization is so unexpected that it nearly stops him in his tracks. Of all the people, of all the moments, why her? Why now? The thought alone is enough to send an unfamiliar sensation through his chest, something dangerously close to, no, impossible. Flustered? Him? His jaw tightens ever so slightly as if trying to shake the thought away, but there's no denying it. Odd. That's the only way to describe it. Sehui Yun, of all people, has somehow carved out a space in his mind that no one else occupies. And for reasons he can't quite explain, that fact alone unsettles him more than anything director Kang could ever say. At a different location, the atmosphere is lively. Decorations are set, expensive wine is poured, and the table is filled with people gathered for one reason: a celebration. Tonight is Sehui's birthday dinner. Her mother, ever the picture of grace, turns to her with a pleasant smile and asks the simplest of questions. How old are you now? Our girl, keeping her tone even, answers, 28. Her mother nods, visibly pleased, as if this is exactly the number she was hoping to hear. With that, she smoothly transitions into another topic: marriage. Apparently, they're already scouting potential suitors for her. No discussion, no input from Sehui required. Just a statement of fact, delivered as casually as a weather update. Then, finance director Jung Si-jo speaks. Her gaze lingers on Sehui for a beat too long, and when she finally opens her mouth, the words that come out are anything but warm. You remind me of Jihui. The smile on her lips is unsettling, as if the sentence itself is some kind of private joke. But it doesn't stop there. She turns to her husband, as if inviting him into the moment. Don't you think so? Sehui doesn't have to look at him to know his answer. He doesn't hesitate, doesn't even pretend to soften the blow. He agrees. Of course. They were identical twins. We had trouble telling them apart back then. The words land like a punch straight to the gut. Sehui's fingers tighten around the fabric of her gown, gripping it like it's the only thing keeping her grounded. Conversation at the table continues as if nothing has happened, as if they aren't casually tossing around the memory of her dead sister like an old family anecdote. Tonight was supposed to be about her. But here they are, sitting around this expensive table, sipping fine wine, speaking of Jihui like she's still a shadow looming over them all. And worst of all, there's no sadness in their voices, no grief, just facts, cold clinical facts. Sehui trembles in her seat, her heart pounding, a bitter taste rising in her throat. These people, they aren't family. They never have been. They are monsters. And tonight they've reminded her exactly why. Without another word, she pushes her chair back and rises abruptly. Excuse me, she says, voice strained but controlled. She doesn't wait for a response. She turns and makes a swift exit, heading straight for the restroom before the storm inside her completely breaks loose. Sehui stumbles into the restroom, her breath shallow, her chest tight. She barely makes it to the toilet bowl before everything she's been holding in comes rushing out. The sound of her own body retching is drowned out by the chaos inside her mind. A world where nothing is right, where the people who should be her family have turned into cold, cruel figures she can barely recognize. The reality of it all presses down on her like a weight she can't escape. She grips the sink, her knuckles white, and as she wipes her mouth, the tears start to fall. There's no stopping them. They flood out like a river that's been dammed too long. The ache in her chest deepens with each sob, and all she can do is let it all pour out. It's the only release she has. In between the tears, she whispers, voice barely audible, "Jae, please save me." Her sister is gone, lost to a cruel twist of fate. But in this moment, Sehui feels the absence like an open wound. There's no one left to save her, no one left to protect her from the suffocating misery her life has become. She clutches at her heart, still shaking, and the question lingers in her mind. Who can take her away from this? Who can be her saving grace? The thought swirls in her mind, but the answer never comes. Not from the people she's surrounded by. Not from the family who should have been there for her. The room spins around her, the weight of the loneliness unbearable, and the only thing she knows for sure is that no one is coming to help her. No one but herself. But for now, all she can do is cry. I don't know about you, but it seems like the drama is just getting started. Want us to continue? Comment part 2 below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.